Hello sleepy soul and welcome back to our channel. If you are new here, don't forget to subscribe and comment down below your name, country and time that you are watching this video at. Enjoy. Am I the a-hole for not covering for my siblings' reckless behavior? I, 26M, have a younger sibling, Jake, 23M, who has always been the wild, impulsive type. Growing up, I was the responsible one, striving to set a good example for him and protect him from making too many mistakes. However, as we grew older, Jake's behavior escalated from harmless pranks to outright recklessness. I've often found myself in situations where I was expected to cover for him, and it's reached a point where I feel I must finally say, no. Jake's antics began in college, where he was known for skipping classes, throwing wild parties, and getting into minor trouble with campus security. I would always help him smooth things over, explaining away his behavior to our parents and even to some professors. I did it out of love, hoping that my guidance would eventually steer him in the right direction. But as the years passed, his behavior only worsened. After college, Jake got a job that required him to travel frequently. Instead of using his newfound freedom responsibly, he started engaging in dangerous activities, driving under the influence, getting into altercations, and making poor decisions that put his safety at risk. More than once, I had to lie to our parents about his whereabouts, saying he was at a friend's house when in reality, he was out partying until dawn. I felt increasingly burdened by the responsibility of always having to cover for him. The tipping point came last summer when Jake was involved in a minor car accident. While no one was hurt, he was clearly at fault and his insurance premiums skyrocketed as a result. When our parents called to ask what happened, I was forced to concoct an elaborate story about a sudden mechanical failure, something I hadn't even had time to verify. I felt like I was living a double life, constantly on edge, and emotionally drained by the need to protect him from the consequences of his own choices. Recently, I made a decision I thought was long overdue. When Jake called me one evening, panicking that he had gotten into another scrape at work, I told him firmly that I wasn't going to cover for him this time. I said, "Jake, I've helped you out every time before, but I can't keep bailing you out. You need to take responsibility for your actions." His reaction was explosive. He accused me of being heartless and even threatened to cut off contact if I didn't come to his rescue. The fallout has been swift. Our parents are furious, calling me selfish and unsupportive, and several mutual friends have sided with Jake, saying that I should always be there for my own sibling. I understand that family means sticking together, but I'm at my limit. I've spent years trying to guide him towards maturity, and it seems that every time I help him, he just learns that there are no real consequences for his actions. Now, I feel trapped between my love for him and my own need for self-respect and accountability. So am I the a-hole for not covering for my siblings' reckless behavior, even though it means facing my family's disapproval? I'm torn because I love Jake deeply and want to see him succeed, but I also believe that enabling his behavior does more harm than good. I hope that by forcing him to face the consequences of his actions, he'll finally learn responsibility. It pains me to be seen as unsupportive by those who think family should always come first, but I have to consider my own mental well-being and the possibility that my constant cover-ups might actually be preventing him from growing up. I just wish things could change without me always having to shoulder the blame for his mistakes. Am I the a-hole for not letting my partner's friends influence our relationship? I, 28F, have been with my boyfriend, Chris, 30M, for 3 years. In the beginning, everything was perfect. We shared interests, communicated openly, and spent a lot of quality time together. However, as time went on, I started noticing that Chris's group of friends seemed to be influencing him in ways that were beginning to create friction in our relationship. Chris's friends, a tight-knit group from college, have always been a major part of his life. They're fun, outgoing, and frequently call him one of the guys. At first I appreciated that he had a supportive social circle, but gradually their opinions began to seep into our relationship. It started with small comments, questions about my career choices, subtle hints about my appearance, and even suggestions that I should be more laid back like them. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just harmless banter. One weekend, Chris invited his friends over for a get-together at our apartment. While I was happy to host, the evening quickly devolved into a scenario where their inside jokes and constant comparisons made me feel like an outsider in my own home. They would laugh at things I said, not because it was funny, but because it reminded them of some past incident or stereotype about girlfriends. Chris, instead of defending me, laughed along, and I felt increasingly isolated. Matters came to a head when one of his friends, Jake, openly criticized the way I handled a minor disagreement between Chris and me. "You really need to chill out," he said in front of everyone, implying that I was overreacting. Chris tried to change the subject, but the damage was done. I felt humiliated and undermined in front of the people I hoped would support our relationship. I later confronted Chris privately, expressing how hurtful it was that his friends' opinions were affecting our dynamic. He promised that he'd talk to them and ensure they respected our boundaries, but things only got worse. Over the next few months, I noticed subtle shifts. When Chris was with his friends, he'd often adopt a different persona, a more carefree, sometimes even reckless version of himself. He'd call me the uptight one and imply that I was the reason he couldn't relax. At dinner parties, he'd compare our relationship to the fun times he had with his friends, making me feel that I was somehow holding him back from experiencing life fully. I tried to speak up during these moments, but he'd dismiss me with a joke or a light comment that made it seem like I was being overly sensitive. My family and close friends eventually noticed the change in Chris and our relationship. They urged me to stand up for myself and not let his friends' opinions dictate how I should live my life. I began to wonder if I was overreacting. Maybe I was just insecure. But every time I saw Chris laughing and joking with his friends at the expense of my feelings, I felt my self-esteem crumble a little more. In the end, I decided that I couldn't continue in a relationship where my voice was constantly drowned out by the opinions of others. I sat Chris down and said, "I love you, but I can't keep feeling like I'm not good enough because your friends decide what's best for you, and by extension, for us." He became defensive and accused me of trying to control who he spends time with, but I stood my ground. I told him that while I respected his friendships, I needed him to prioritize our relationship over the opinions of a group that had become increasingly toxic. Since that conversation, our relationship has been on shaky ground. Some of his friends have distanced themselves, while others continue to make snide remarks behind my back. Chris is torn between defending me and maintaining his loyalty to his old friends. I've been called insecure and jealous by people who say that I should just accept him for who he is, friends and all. Yet I can't help but feel that my needs in the relationship are being sidelined. So, am I the a-hole for not letting my partner's friends influence our relationship, even if it means causing friction between me and Chris? I'm left questioning whether true love should require compromising one's own dignity and self-respect. I want to feel valued for who I am, not for how well I can mimic what his friends expect. I believe that every relationship should have boundaries, especially when it comes to external influences, and I only want to be with someone who understands that my feelings matter. I just hope that, over time, Chris will come to see that it's not about choosing between me and his friends, but about recognizing that a strong partnership is built on mutual respect and understanding. Am I the a-hole for prioritizing my mental health over my family's expectations? I, 37F, have always been the one my family turned to for support, advice, and care. Growing up in a close-knit household, I was raised to believe that family should always come first, no matter what. I sacrificed a lot for my relatives, often putting their needs above my own. Over time, however, the constant pressure and expectations began to take a severe toll on my mental health. For years, I juggled multiple roles. I was the mediator in family disputes, the caretaker for aging parents, the confidant for my siblings, and the one who organized every family event. I prided myself on being selfless, always available to lend an ear or help with a crisis. But as the demands piled up, I started to feel overwhelmed, anxious, and utterly exhausted. I began having panic attacks and eventually sought therapy, which opened my eyes to the fact that I had been neglecting my own well-being. My therapist encouraged me to set boundaries, to learn to say no without feeling guilty, and to prioritize self-care. I took her advice to heart and began making small changes, declining invitations when I needed time to recharge, asking for help when I was overwhelmed, and even turning down requests for favors that I simply couldn't manage. I was determined to reclaim my life and mental health. This new approach, however, did not go over well with my family. When I started saying no, especially to plans that involved long hours or emotional labor, I was met with shock and anger. My parents accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, and my siblings said I was abandoning them in their time of need. One family dinner turned into a heated argument, with my aunt exclaiming, "How can you put yourself first when we're all struggling?" I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just needed to care for myself so that I could actually be there for them in a healthier way. Over the following months, the backlash only intensified. Invitations to family gatherings dwindled as my relatives whispered about how I was forgetting my roots or turning my back on the family. I received messages saying I was making excuses for my behavior, and some even accused me of using my mental health as a shield to avoid responsibilities. The emotional toll was immense. I felt torn between the guilt of disappointing my family and the relief of finally taking care of my own needs. I've now made a conscious decision. I will no longer allow myself to be consumed by the constant demands of others at the expense of my own well-being. I've started setting clear boundaries, saying no when necessary, and focusing on self-care practices that help me recharge. I still love my family, but I've come to realize that I can't pour from an empty cup. I must prioritize my mental health if I'm ever going to be a positive force in their lives. So am I the a-hole for prioritizing my mental health over my family's expectations? I'm left questioning if I'm being selfish for putting myself first, even though I know that without self-care, I can't truly help anyone. I understand that family is important, but I also believe that my mental health is crucial to my overall happiness and well-being. I hope that in time, my family will see that setting boundaries isn't about abandoning them. It's about ensuring I can be the best version of myself for everyone in the long run. Am I the a-hole for refusing to lend my vacation home to my extended family? I, 45, and work hard all year and finally managed to purchase a vacation home, a peaceful cabin tucked away in the mountains. It's been my sanctuary, a place where I can unwind, recharge, and escape from the pressures of daily life. Over the years, I've hosted a few close friends and family members at the cabin, and it has always been a source of joy. However, things took an unexpected turn when my extended family began demanding regular access to the property. It started innocently enough. My cousin, Rebecca, 42F, asked if she could spend a weekend at the cabin, and I happily agreed. I wanted my family to have a piece of this special place, but soon what began as occasional visits escalated into a routine. Every major family gathering or holiday, someone would suggest, "Why don't we all go to the cabin this year?" I tried to accommodate at first. I even gave discounts on rental fees to family members, wanting to keep our bond strong. Over time, however, the demands grew unreasonable. Relatives started booking the cabin without consulting me first, assuming it was a free-for-all. There were weekends when I'd arrive home only to find that the cabin had been overrun by relatives who treated it like their personal resort. The cleanliness suffered, and the peaceful atmosphere I'd worked so hard to cultivate was replaced by chaos and constant noise. I realized that my vacation home was no longer a private retreat. It had become a communal property that everyone felt entitled to use whenever they wanted. I tried to set boundaries by explaining that the cabin was my personal haven, and that I needed to maintain control over its use. I told them that reservations needed to be made in advance, and that certain weekends would be off-limits for personal use or maintenance. This suggestion was met with outrage by several family members. They accused me of being stingy and ungrateful, claiming that I was hoarding a family resource and not sharing the love. I was particularly hurt when my own sister, who had always been close to me, said, "How can you be so selfish about something that's supposed to bring the whole family together?" The situation reached its peak when my uncle tried to book the cabin for an entire month during the holidays, an action that would have disrupted my own plans. I firmly told him that I couldn't allow it, as I had already scheduled personal time there. In response, he declared that I was ruining the spirit of family and that I should learn to share. The backlash was swift. Soon, family WhatsApp groups were buzzing with heated messages, and I found myself at the center of a controversy I never expected. Now, my vacation home, which was once a symbol of hard work and relaxation, has become a bone of contention. I'm caught between my desire to protect my personal space and the guilt of letting down my family, who seem to believe that my success means I should give up everything for them. My wife supports me, reminding me that I have every right to enjoy the fruits of my labor without feeling pressured to share it on demand. But the constant barrage of accusations and the emotional toll of family strife have left me questioning if I'm in the wrong. So, am I the a-hole for refusing to lend my vacation home to my extended family, even though they claim that I should? Share everything I have for the sake of family unity. I believe that while family is important, boundaries are essential. My vacation home represents years of hard work and is a place where I can recharge, something I need in order to be the best husband, father, and provider I can be. I'm torn because I want to be generous, but I also feel that my personal well-being should not be sacrificed in the name of family. I just wish that my relatives could understand that sharing doesn't mean giving up your identity or your personal sanctuary. Am I the a-hole for ending a long-term relationship because my partner refused to compromise on parenting? 33F was in a relationship with Mark, 34M, for over 8 years. We shared many wonderful memories, built a life together, and even discussed starting a family someday. As our relationship progressed, however, it became increasingly clear that we had very different ideas about what kind of parents we would be. Mark grew up in a household where strict discipline and rigid routines were the norm. He believed that children needed structure and that every minute of their day should be planned. I, on the other hand, value spontaneity and believe in giving children room to explore and develop their own interests. When the topic of having kids came up, I was excited about the prospect of raising a family in an environment that nurtured creativity and independence. Mark, however, was adamant about a highly structured lifestyle, one that would include fixed bedtimes, strict meal schedules, and a heavy focus on academic and extracurricular achievement from a very young age. In the early years of our relationship, we managed to put aside these differences. I told myself that love was about compromise, that maybe over time our views would blend together to form a balanced approach. But as we began discussing concrete plans for starting a family, the disagreements grew more frequent and intense. Mark would lecture me on the importance of discipline and predictability, often citing his own childhood as evidence of how structure leads to success. I would counter with research on how a flexible environment fosters creativity and emotional well-being. Neither of us was willing to budge. The situation reached a breaking point when we attended a parenting seminar together. During a Q&A session, the speaker asked how we would handle conflicts between our differing parenting styles. Mark almost dismissively stated, "I would never allow my child to have too much freedom. They need boundaries to succeed." I was mortified that he would express such a rigid view in public, especially knowing that I envisioned a more balanced, nurturing approach. After the seminar, I confronted him privately, saying, "If we can't agree on how to raise a child, then how can we possibly build a family together?" Mark responded that I was being idealistic and that his way was proven to work. Over the next few months, our arguments became a daily occurrence. Every discussion about potential names, school choices, or even weekend activities turned into a battleground. I felt suffocated by the constant pressure to conform to a set plan that didn't leave room for flexibility or the natural flow of life. My friends began noticing the toll it was taking on me. I became withdrawn, anxious, and unsure if I was sacrificing my own beliefs for the sake of the relationship. After a particularly heated argument, where Mark insisted that I get real about the demands of parenting, I realized that our core values were too divergent. It wasn't just about how to raise children, it was about what kind of life we wanted to lead. I had always believed that parenting was a partnership, a balance between guidance and freedom. Mark's uncompromising stance left me feeling trapped in a future that wasn't mine to choose. I made the painful decision to end the relationship, telling Mark that I couldn't imagine a life where my voice wasn't heard in such an important matter. He accused me of being unrealistic and selfish, claiming that I was willing to jeopardize everything for the sake of my ideals. My family and close friends have since been divided. Some believe I was right to stand up for my beliefs, while others think I should have tried harder to compromise. So, am I the a-hole for ending a long-term relationship because my partner refused to compromise on parenting philosophies? I'm left grappling with the heartache of a relationship that lasted nearly a decade. Yet I firmly believe that having a unified vision for something as important as raising children is crucial. I understand that no two people are exactly alike, but when it comes to shaping the lives of future generations, I feel that compromise is not optional, it's essential. I only wish that Mark could have seen that our differences in perspective might have enriched our family life rather than divided us irreparably. Am I the a-hole for refusing to babysit my neighbor's kids? Every weekend, I, 34 am, have always considered myself a helpful guy. I volunteer at community events, help neighbors fix things around the house, and generally try to maintain a friendly atmosphere in our suburban neighborhood. However, over the past year, I've found myself in a difficult situation that has made me question whether I'm being unreasonable. My neighbor, Lisa, 38F, has 2 young kids, Sam, 5, and Lily, 3. When we first met, I was happy to lend a hand here and there. I'd occasionally offer to help watch the kids for a couple of hours when she needed to run errands or attend appointments. Initially, it was all good. My wife and I enjoyed spending time with the little ones, and Lisa expressed her gratitude for our support. But as time went on, what started as occasional babysitting gradually morphed into a regular expectation. It began with weekends when Lisa mentioned, "Hey, we could really use some help with the kids this Saturday." And before I knew it, she was asking every weekend. Even during family holidays, or when my own schedule was packed with work and personal commitments, the request seemed to persist. I tried to be accommodating at first. I truly believed that in a close-knit community, neighbors support each other. However, my wife began to notice that I was increasingly stressed. We had planned a few nights out together, and on several occasions I had to cancel or cut short those plans because Lisa's call for babysitting came at the last minute. I started feeling as though my personal time was being usurped by an expectation that I should be available whenever Lisa needed help. Despite politely explaining that I had my own commitments, it seemed that my refusal was met with guilt trips and disappointment. Lisa would say things like, "I guess I can't count on you anymore," or "You used to be so reliable." The pressure intensified when our mutual friends started commenting on how hands-on and supportive we were as neighbors. I began to worry that if I said no, no one would come to help me when I needed it. I started to feel like a doormat, always expected to put the needs of someone else before my own. My wife, who initially encouraged me to help out, eventually started to question whether it was sustainable for our family. She pointed out that my work stress had increased and that I was often too exhausted to enjoy our evenings at home. After one particularly chaotic weekend, where I had to rush from a critical work meeting to a last-minute babysitting job that left me sleep-deprived for days, I finally decided that enough was enough. I told Lisa firmly that, while I appreciated our neighborly bond, I needed to set boundaries. "I'm sorry, Lisa," I said, "but I can't commit to babysitting every weekend anymore. I have responsibilities to my own family and work, and I need to reclaim some personal time." Lisa reacted with visible hurt. She accused me of abandoning her in a time of need, saying that I was letting the kids down and that our community should be about mutual sacrifice. Some of our other neighbors chimed in, suggesting that I was being selfish and unhelpful. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not caring, it was about balancing responsibilities and mental health. I told her that I would still help out, on occasion when truly necessary, but I could no longer be her default babysitter every weekend. In the weeks since my decision, tensions have simmered in the neighborhood. Lisa has become distant, and our previously friendly gatherings now have an awkward edge. I've even been called inconsiderate by a few of our neighbors, which has made me question if I'm in the wrong. Yet, deep down, I know that I was reaching a breaking point. Constantly sacrificing my time without any reciprocity was affecting not only my work, but my overall well-being, and ultimately, my ability to be there for my family. So, am I the a-hole for refusing to babysit my neighbor's kids every weekend? I understand that community is important, and I never meant to hurt Lisa. But I believe that setting healthy boundaries is essential for maintaining good relationships. I'm struggling with the guilt of not being as available as I once was, but I also feel that I deserve some respect for my time and commitments. I hope that with time, our neighbors will understand that caring for yourself is just as important as caring for others. Am I the a-hole for not letting my best friend borrow my car after she damaged it? The 30F. Have always prided myself on being generous with my resources, especially for those closest to me. My best friend, Kayla, 31F, and I have been through thick and thin together. We've supported each other through breakups, family crises, and career challenges. Over the years, I lent her money, listened to her problems, and even helped her move multiple times. So when she asked if she could borrow my car for an important job interview, I didn't hesitate until an unexpected incident forced me to say no. A few months ago, while I was away on a business trip, I lent my car to Kayla because she needed to attend a series of job interviews. I trusted her implicitly, as I always had, so I didn't worry too much about the car's safety. When I returned, however, I noticed a dent on the side and a small scratch on the bumper that I didn't have before. I confronted Kayla, who admitted that while driving back from an interview, she had accidentally hit a curb and scraped the car. She was apologetic and insisted that it wasn't a big deal, promising that she would cover the repair costs. I accepted her apology and even let it go, believing that accidents happen. But as time passed, I began to notice a change in Kayla's attitude toward borrowing my belongings. She started casually asking for favors, borrowing my car for weekend trips, using my expensive tech gadgets, and even expecting me to cover minor damages without offering to reimburse me. The incident with the car had been a turning point. I realized that while I was always willing to help, there needed to be limits when it came to the repeated negligence that endangered my property. When Kayla recently asked if she could borrow my car again for another job interview, I hesitated. I explained that I wasn't comfortable lending out the car after the previous incident, given that repairs had cost me a significant amount out of pocket. She became defensive, saying that I was being unreasonable and that as her best friend, she expected me to trust her judgment. She argued that accidents are just accidents and that I should be more understanding of her situation, especially when she was actively trying to better her career prospects. In response, I said, "I appreciate that you're trying to advance your career, but my car is important to me, not just as a vehicle, but as a resource that I work hard to maintain. I can't risk it being damaged again, and I feel like every time something like this happens, I end up being the one who pays the price." Her reaction was swift and emotional. Kayla accused me of being selfish and unsupportive, claiming that I was prioritizing material possessions over our friendship. Our mutual friends soon got wind of the situation. Some told me that I was being overly protective and that true friends should be willing to overlook minor accidents. Others argued that I was justified in setting boundaries, especially since I'd repeatedly been left to handle the fallout of her careless behavior. I found myself torn. On one hand, I deeply valued our friendship, but on the other hand, I couldn't keep absorbing the financial and emotional costs of her repeated mistakes. After a heated discussion that lasted several hours, Kayla stormed out of my apartment, saying that I had betrayed her trust and that our friendship wasn't as important to me as I claimed. Since then, our texts have been sparse, and mutual friends have been urging me to apologize for overreacting. I'm left wondering if I'm the a-hole for not letting her borrow my car again, or if I'm simply protecting what's rightfully mine. So, am I the a-hole for not letting my best friend borrow my car after she damaged it? I feel conflicted because while I love Kayla and want to support her, I also need to protect my own interests and set reasonable boundaries. I worry that by saying no, I'm jeopardizing a relationship that once meant everything to me. But I also believe that trust and responsibility are crucial in any friendship, and I can't help but feel that repeated negligence shouldn't be rewarded. Am I the a-hole for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after she ignored my role in her life? I, 32F, have always believed that family is everything, especially when it comes to my sister, Rachel, 35F. Growing up, we were inseparable, sharing secrets, supporting one another through heartbreaks and celebrating every milestone together. I always assumed that when Rachel got married, I would naturally have an important role in her big day. However, as her wedding approached, I was stunned to discover that I had been completely sidelined. For months leading up to the wedding, Rachel would share details about the planning process, expecting my advice on everything from dress choices to venue decor. I was thrilled to be involved, offering ideas and helping her navigate the stressful process. I even rearranged my work schedule to accommodate dress fittings and planning sessions. Naturally, I assumed I'd be asked to be a bridesmaid, a role I'd cherished in our past family events. Then, a few weeks before the wedding, Rachel sat me down for what she called a heart-to-heart. With a forced smile, she explained that she had decided to keep the bridal party small and that I would not be one of the bridesmaids. Instead, I was told I'd have a special role behind the scenes, coordinating logistics and ensuring everything ran smoothly on the day. At first, I tried to understand her perspective. After all, every wedding has limitations, and perhaps she thought that being behind the scenes was just as meaningful as being on the front line. But as the wedding day drew closer, I began to notice subtle ways in which my contributions were dismissed. While the other bridesmaids were involved in all the festivities, from pre-wedding photo shoots to being present during emotional moments, I was relegated to handling the logistics, a job that was both thankless and isolating. I spent endless hours coordinating vendors, managing last-minute changes, and ensuring that everyone was on schedule. All the while, I watched from the sidelines as the other bridesmaids were showered with praise and affection by our family and friends. The final blow came during the rehearsal dinner. Rachel, in a speech meant for the entire bridal party, singled out the other bridesmaids for their beauty, support, and presence, while my contributions were brushed over with a casual, "Thank you for handling everything behind the scenes." I felt my heart sink as the room erupted in applause for the others. It was clear that my role was being intentionally minimized, and I began to wonder if my years of unconditional support meant nothing to her anymore. After the rehearsal dinner, I confronted Rachel privately. I asked her why she hadn't included me as a bridesmaid when I'd been there for every step of the planning process. Rachel's response was defensive. "I thought you'd prefer a quieter role, handling things without the stress of being in the spotlight. I didn't want you to feel pressured." Her words only deepened the wound. I felt betrayed and hurt. What I interpreted as an effort to protect me only served to diminish my importance in her life. I spent sleepless nights agonizing over the decision I had to make. Ultimately, I decided that I couldn't attend the wedding. I told Rachel that I needed time to process everything and that I wasn't comfortable being at an event where I felt so sidelined. When I broke the news to our parents and close family, reactions were mixed. Some said I was overreacting and that weddings are stressful enough as it is, while others admitted that Rachel's behavior felt unfair. Since then, the family gatherings have been tense, with whispers about how I made a scene and ruined a once-in-a-lifetime event. I still miss my sister terribly, and the pain of being excluded from her wedding has left a deep scar. I wonder if I was wrong to set such a hard boundary, or if I'm simply not valued as a family member anymore. So, am I the a-hole for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after she ignored my role in her life? I'm struggling with the sense of loss and betrayal that this decision has brought me. I want to be supportive and involved in my family's happiness, but I also need to feel respected and valued. I'm torn between the desire to repair our bond and the need to protect my own self-worth. I just hope that one day Rachel will understand the depth of my hurt and that we can find a way back to the closeness we once shared. Am I the a-hole for declining to cover for my roommate's mess at work? D27M recently moved into an apartment with my roommate Tyler, 26M, after meeting through a mutual friend. Tyler and I got along well during the initial months. He was laid back and friendly, and I appreciated having a companion in a new city. However, things took a turn when I started working at a fast-paced startup where professionalism and order were critical. Tyler works from home and is notoriously disorganized. His side of the apartment is a constant mess. Dirty dishes pile up in the sink, laundry is strewn around, and personal items clutter the common areas. I've always tried to keep my side neat and make sure that our shared spaces remain presentable for guests. At first, I attempted to gently remind Tyler to tidy up, but he brushed it off, saying that he just needed a bit more time and that he was working on it. One day, I hosted a small work gathering at our apartment, a chance to network with colleagues and showcase my new home. I spent hours cleaning, decorating, and ensuring that everything looked perfect. When my colleagues arrived, I was proud of the polished look. However, mid-evening, one of them mentioned a disturbing detail. They had noticed Tyler's chaos spilling into the living room. In a moment of panic, I found myself frantically trying to hide stacks of unwashed clothes and overflowing trash bins as more guests began to arrive unexpectedly. My boss, who was also at the gathering, later asked me why our apartment looked disheveled, given that it was representing our company's image during an informal event. I felt cornered. Should I explain that it wasn't entirely my responsibility, or should I take the blame to avoid damaging my professional reputation? I ended up covering for Tyler, claiming that it was an unexpected situation beyond my control. After the event, I confronted Tyler. I said, "Tyler, I know you're busy, but our shared space is affecting my work life. I shouldn't have to cover up your mess or lie for you in front of my boss." Tyler became defensive and insisted that he had been really busy with personal projects and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. He even argued that I should have been more understanding given the circumstances. The fallout was immediate. My colleagues started gossiping that I was blaming others for my own shortcomings, and some of my superiors wondered if I was capable of managing a team if I couldn't even manage my living situation. I tried to explain privately that I had no control over Tyler's behavior, but the damage was done. I began to receive mixed reactions at work. Some understood my frustration, while others said I should have taken a firmer stand and set clearer boundaries. At home, the tension escalated as Tyler continued his careless habits, leaving me feeling trapped in a situation where I was constantly left to pick up the pieces. I contemplated moving out, but the lease was for another year, and finding a new place in a tight rental market wasn't feasible. My frustration grew as I felt that my professional life was being tarnished by someone else's irresponsibility, and I began to resent Tyler not only as a roommate, but also as a threat to my career. So am I the a-hole for declining to cover for my roommate's mess at work, even though it meant putting my job at risk? I feel torn because I want to maintain a good relationship with my roommate, but I also need to protect my professional reputation. I believe that everyone should be accountable for their own actions, and I shouldn't have to bear the consequences of someone else's disorganization. I'm now considering whether I should take more drastic measures, like confronting the situation with the landlord, or even looking for a new living arrangement. But I worry about the repercussions on my finances and social circle. I just wish Tyler understood that living together means sharing responsibility, not just coexisting under the same roof, without any regard for each other's well-being. Am I the a-hole for cutting off a toxic friend after constant gaslighting? I, 29F, have always prided myself on being a supportive friend, someone people could rely on. For nearly a decade, I was best friends with Mandy, 29F. We bonded over shared interests, late-night conversations, and mutual support during tough times. I thought we had an unbreakable bond until things started to shift. Over the past 2 years, I began noticing subtle changes in our interactions. Mandy, once open and caring, started to dismiss my feelings and make me question my own memory of events. Every time I brought up something that hurt me, a cancelled plan, a forgotten birthday, or even a misinterpreted joke, she would twist the conversation. "I never said that," she'd insist, or "You're just being too sensitive," even when I had clear evidence of her hurtful words. At first, I chalked it up to stress or a rough patch, but soon the pattern became unmistakable. It wasn't just about isolated incidents. During group outings, I'd catch her making snide remarks behind my back, then later deny it when confronted. There were times I'd recount a situation to her, only for her to later claim I had entirely misunderstood her intentions. The worst part was that she always had a clever comeback, leaving me questioning whether I was the one in the wrong. I started to feel as though I was losing my grip on reality, an experience that left me feeling isolated, anxious, and utterly alone. For months, I tried to salvage the friendship. I attempted honest conversations in quiet moments, expressing that I felt manipulated and dismissed. Each time, Mandy would reassure me that I was overreacting, insisting that I needed to learn, to take a joke or simply let things go. "You're imagining things," she would say with a patronizing smile. But deep down, I knew that something wasn't right. My self-esteem had taken a hit. I was constantly second-guessing myself, even in situations where I'd been confident before. The final straw came during a weekend getaway we had planned with a few mutual friends. While discussing plans for the day, I casually mentioned a recent personal success, something that I'd worked hard to achieve. Instead of offering congratulations, Mandy responded with a dismissive comment about how I was always bragging, and that I should be more humble. In front of everyone, she then proceeded to recount several instances where I supposedly exaggerated my accomplishments. I felt humiliated and shocked. It was as though my feelings and successes were being undermined entirely. After that incident, I spent a long night questioning the friendship. I revisited old conversations, looked up old messages, and realized that Mandy's behavior had been a slow burn of manipulation that had eroded my confidence. I reached out to a trusted friend for perspective, and they confirmed that the pattern I described was classic gaslighting. Though it hurt, I finally accepted that I deserved better than to have my reality constantly questioned by someone I once considered my closest friend. I decided to confront Mandy one last time. I called her, and in a calm yet firm voice, explained how her constant dismissals, rewording of events and belittling comments had left me feeling devalued. Instead of apologizing, she accused me of being dramatic and paranoid, insisting that I was the one at fault for not trusting her. In that moment, I knew that the friendship was irreparably damaged. I told her that I was cutting off contact until she could accept responsibility for her behavior, and that I would be moving on for my own mental health. Since ending our friendship, I've had to navigate a roller coaster of emotions. Mutual friends have taken sides, some calling me ungrateful for ending a decade-long friendship, while others say I finally saw the truth. I still have moments of self-doubt, questioning if maybe I overreacted or misinterpreted her actions. But every time I recall her smarmy denial or the hurt I felt when I was publicly shamed, I know deep down that my decision was necessary. So, am I the a-hole for cutting off a toxic friend after constant gaslighting? I feel that I deserved honesty, respect, and validation in my closest relationships. While it hurts to lose a long-time friend, I believe that protecting my mental well-being and self-respect is more important than holding on to something that only drains me. I hope that one day Mandy realizes the damage she's caused, but until then I need to prioritize my own health and surround myself with people who truly care. Am I the a-hole for kicking my sister out of my wedding after she showed up in a white dress? I, 29F, got married last month to my wonderful husband, 30mm. And while the day was mostly perfect, there was one major incident that still has my family divided. For some context, my younger sister, 26F, whom I'll call Sarah, has always had a habit of making everything about herself. Growing up, she constantly found ways to be the center of attention, whether it was my birthday, a school achievement, or even minor family gatherings. My parents enabled this behavior, constantly making excuses for her and brushing off my frustrations as me being dramatic. When I got engaged, Sarah made several comments about how she should have been the one getting married first because she was prettier and more charismatic. I ignored her, chalking it up to her usual self-absorbed behavior. However, as the wedding planning progressed, she became increasingly difficult. She complained about the bridesmaid dress color, claimed she should be my maid of honor, even though I had already asked my best friend, and even threw a fit when I told her I wouldn't be making special accommodations for her gluten-free diet, when we were already offering multiple meal options. The breaking point, however, was the wedding day itself. Sarah showed up wearing a floor-length lace white dress. At first I thought it was a joke, but no, she was absolutely serious. Guests were staring, whispering, and my mother tried to convince me to let it go because Sarah just wants to feel beautiful. I was livid, but kept my cool until after the ceremony. At the reception, I calmly pulled Sarah aside and told her she needed to leave. She threw a tantrum, screaming that I was ruining her night and being insecure. When I stood my ground, she started crying loudly, drawing even more attention to herself. Eventually, security had to escort her out because she refused to leave quietly. My mum was furious, saying I humiliated my sister on my wedding day, and several family members have taken her side, claiming I overreacted. Despite this, my husband, in-laws, and friends all agree that I was justified. But now my parents are barely speaking to me, and Sarah is playing the victim, telling everyone I ruined her relationship with the family. So, am I the a-hole for kicking my sister out of my wedding after she showed up in a white dress? Am I the a-hole for telling my parents they shouldn't have had more kids if they couldn't afford them? I, 24F, am the oldest of 5 kids. My parents had me when they were young. Mom was 19, Dad was 21, and they struggled financially for most of my childhood. Despite this, they kept having more kids. By the time my youngest sibling, 10M, was born, we were barely scraping by. I spent most of my teenage years babysitting, cooking, and taking care of my siblings, while my parents worked multiple jobs. When I turned 18, I moved out for college on a full scholarship and worked part-time to support myself. My parents constantly asked me for money, which I gave when I could, but I wasn't in a great financial position either. After graduating, I got a decent-paying job, but I still had student loans and rent to worry about. Recently, my parents sat me down and told me they needed financial help again because their bills were piling up. They expected me to contribute a significant portion of my paycheck to help out with groceries, rent, and my younger siblings' expenses. I told them I couldn't afford to do that and that I already had my own bills to pay. My mom started crying, saying that family takes care of each other, and my dad got angry, saying I was being selfish after everything they had done for me. At that point, I snapped and told them, "You shouldn't have had more kids if you couldn't afford them. It's not my responsibility to pay for your choices." My mom completely broke down, and my dad told me to leave if I was going to be so heartless. Now my siblings are upset with me, and some extended family members are calling me ungrateful. A few relatives, however, agree that my parents shouldn't expect me to foot the bill for their decisions. I feel awful because I love my family, but I also feel like I've been parentified my whole life, and I'm just trying to live independently now. Am I the a-hole for what I said? Am I the a-hole for refusing to pay for my girlfriend's friend on our vacation? I, 27M, have been dating my girlfriend Lily, 25F, for about 2 years. We have a great relationship overall, but recently we had a huge fight over something that I feel is completely unfair to me. A few months ago, I planned a vacation for Lily and me. I paid for everything, flights, hotels, excursions, and even set aside extra spending money so she wouldn't have to worry about anything. It was supposed to be a romantic getaway for just the two of us. However, a week before our trip, Lily told me that her best friend, Sophie, 25F, was going through a tough time and asked if she could come along. I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I didn't want to be the bad guy, so I reluctantly agreed under the condition that Sophie would pay her own way. Lily assured me that Sophie could afford it, and I made it clear that I wasn't paying for anything beyond what I had already budgeted for Lily and myself. Fast forward to the trip and the moment. We arrived. Sophie acted as though she was entitled to everything I had paid for. She expected to share our hotel room, joined us on all our couple's activities, and even tried to order expensive drinks and meals under my tab. When the bill came, she either forgot her wallet or assumed it was covered. I was annoyed, but kept my mouth shut at first to avoid causing tension. However, by the 3rd day, I was done. We went to an expensive restaurant, and Sophie again tried to order a 3-course meal and multiple cocktails on my dime. I told her flat out, "You're paying for your own meal." She laughed it off, thinking I was joking. When the bill came, she conveniently had left her card at the hotel. I refused to cover her portion, and things got awkward. Lily ended up paying for Sophie, but after we got back to our room, she blew up at me for embarrassing her friend. She accused me of being cheap and unsympathetic to Sophie's struggles. I argued that I was already paying for everything for her, and it wasn't fair to expect me to bankroll her friend too. The rest of the trip was tense. When we got home, Sophie told our mutual friends that I was controlling and stingy, and now some of them are taking her side. Lily is still upset, saying I should have just been nice and paid for Sophie since it wasn't a big deal in the grand scheme of things. I, on the other hand, feel completely used. Am I the a-hole for refusing to pay for my girlfriend's friend on our vacation? Am I the a-hole for refusing to share my inheritance with my half-siblings? 32 and Mary recently inherited a significant amount of money from my late grandmother. This has caused an enormous rift in my family, and now I'm wondering if I'm truly in the wrong. To provide some background, my parents divorced when I was 10, my dad remarried within a year, and his new wife Laura had 2 kids from a previous marriage, Jake, 30M, and Emma, 28F. They later had a child together, my half-brother Lucas, 22M. While my dad always emphasized that we were all one big happy family, the reality was very different. I was frequently pushed aside in favor of Laura's kids. She would make little comments about how I looked too much like my mother, and would insist on treating all 3 of her kids as equals, while I was often an afterthought. My dad tried, but he never really stood up for me when Laura would exclude me. For example, when I was 16, they went on a big family vacation to Europe and told me there wasn't enough room for me to come. When I complained, my dad said, "We'll make it up to you." But that never happened. By the time I turned 18, I was out of the house as soon as I could be. My relationship with my dad remained distant, and my half-siblings barely reached out unless they needed something. Fast forward to now, my grandmother, my dad's mother, passed away a few months ago. She and I were incredibly close, and she never liked how my father and Laura treated me. She made it clear to me over the years that she had set aside money specifically for me in her will. When she passed, it turned out that she had left me a substantial inheritance, enough to pay off my mortgage and still have savings left over. My father and his other children received sentimental items, but no money. When my dad found out, he was furious. He and Laura called me saying it was unfair and that my grandmother had let resentment get in the way of treating all her grandchildren equally. They demanded that I split the money evenly among myself, Jake, Emma, and Lucas. I refused, explaining that my grandmother made her decision based on how I was treated growing up, and that this money was hers to distribute as she saw fit. Things escalated quickly. Laura accused me of punishing her children for something they had no control over. Jake and Emma both sent me messages saying I was being greedy and selfish, claiming that family helps family. Lucas, the only one who has ever been somewhat close to me, said he understood, but that he wished I would at least consider giving him something, since he had nothing to do with how I was treated as a kid. Now, my father has threatened to cut me off completely if I don't share. I told him, "You already did that years ago." Since then, I've been bombarded with texts from extended family members, some supporting me and others saying I'm heartless. So, am I the a-hole for refusing to share my inheritance? Am I the a-hole for uninviting my best man after he proposed at my wedding? I, 31M, recently got married to my amazing wife, Emma, 30F, and while the day was supposed to be one of the happiest of my life, it was completely overshadowed by drama, caused by my now former best friend and best man, Ryan, 32M. Ryan and I have been best friends since college. We've been through a lot together, and I always considered him family. So when I got engaged to Emma, he was my first choice for best man. At first, everything was great. He helped with planning the bachelor party, stood by me through the wedding stress, and seemed genuinely happy for me. However, about 2 weeks before the wedding, he started acting weird. He kept dropping hints about how special occasions are the best times for big gestures and how love should be celebrated. In the moment, I didn't think much of it at the time because Ryan had been dating his girlfriend, Katie, 29F, for about 4 years, and I assumed he was just being romantic. Fast forward to the wedding day. Everything was going beautifully. Emma looked stunning. The ceremony was perfect, and we were having an amazing time celebrating. That was until the reception, when Ryan took the mic during the speeches. I assumed he was about to give a heartfelt toast. Instead, he turned to Katie, got down on one knee, and proposed. The entire room went silent. Katie looked completely shocked, and not in a good way. Emma's face dropped, and I could feel the mood of the entire reception shift. After what felt like an eternity, Katie gave a hesitant yes, but it was clear she was uncomfortable. People started clapping, but it was awkward and half-hearted. My wife looked like she was about to cry, and I was absolutely furious. I pulled Ryan aside after his moment and asked him what the hell he was thinking. He had the audacity to say that he thought it would be romantic and that everyone was already celebrating love, so what's the big deal? I told him he completely disrespected me, Emma, and the entire wedding by making it about himself. He got defensive and said that I should be happy for him, that it wasn't a big deal, and that I was overreacting. I wasn't having it. I told him to leave the wedding immediately. He was shocked and tried to argue, but I wasn't budging. Some of our friends backed me up, while others said I was being too harsh. Since then, Ryan has been playing the victim, telling people I ruined his proposal, and that I kicked him out over nothing. Some friends and even a couple of family members have said that, while it was in poor taste, it wasn't worth ending a lifelong friendship over. Meanwhile, Emma still feels hurt, and I can't shake the anger I feel about the whole thing. So am I the a-hole for uninviting my best man after he proposed at my wedding? So I need to figure out if I'm in the wrong here. Let me start by saying family dynamics are messy, and I'm stuck in the middle of a storm. My wedding was last month, and things have been tense ever since because I didn't invite my older brother, Mark. For context, Mark and I haven't spoken in nearly 4 years. Our falling out happened after he borrowed $15,000 from me to start a food truck business, promising to pay it back within a year. Not only did he never repay a dime, but when I gently brought it up after 2 years, he accused me of prioritizing money over family and cut off contact. He skipped our dad's funeral 6 months later, which felt like a final straw. When my fiancée, Lena, and I got engaged, we agreed early on to keep the wedding small, 50 people max, mostly close friends and immediate family. Lena's parents contributed financially, but we still had a tight budget. I debated inviting Mark. Part of me wanted to extend an olive branch, but Lena pointed out that he'd never apologized or acknowledged the debt, let alone tried to rebuild our relationship. Worse, he'd badmouthed me to our cousins, claiming I'd abandoned him during his divorce, which happened years before our fight. Ultimately, I decided not to invite him. I told my mom, who sighed and said, "He's still your brother," but didn't push further. The wedding itself was beautiful until the reception. My aunt pulled me aside and hissed, "How dare you exclude Mark, he's blood." Turns out Mark had posted a vague Facebook rant the night before about family betrayal, and relatives were buzzing. My mom then admitted she'd told Mark about the wedding, hoping I'd come to my senses. He'd apparently shown up to the church that morning but left when he realized he wasn't on the guest list. Chaos erupted. My grandma called me a selfish disgrace for humiliating Mark. My cousins bombarded my phone with texts like, "You couldn't suck it up for one day?" Even Lena's mum quietly asked if we'd consider reimbursing Mark's emotional distress, whatever that means. But the kicker? Mark sent me an invoice for yon $200, the cost of a suit he'd bought, in anticipation of being your best man, which I'd never asked him to do. Here's where I might be the a-hole. I retaliated. I posted a screenshot of the invoice in our family group chat with the caption, "Still monetizing relationships, I see." It went nuclear. My dad's side of the family branded me petty and unforgiving. My mum cried for days, saying I'd torn the family apart. But Lena and my friends argue I had every right to set boundaries. They've watched me stress over the debt for years, and as one friend put it, why reward someone who treats you like an ATM? The fallout is ongoing. Mark's now threatening to sue me for defamation over the group chat post. My mum won't speak to me unless I apologize to Mark, but I refuse. He's never once said sorry. My dad, who's usually neutral, told me, "You're not wrong, but was the wedding really the hill to die on?" I'm torn. Part of me feels justified. Mark hasn't changed, and inviting him would have added stress to a day that's supposed to be about joy. But another part wonders if I'm holding a grudge too tightly. My grandma's words haunt me. Family forgives. Yet I can't shake the resentment. Am I the a-hole for refusing to invite him, or are they wrong for demanding? I overlook years of dysfunction,